Okay, so I think that in population is a good time to start looking at how images or graphs could be used, and you'd have to analyze them. Okay, so when we look at population, a lot of times we're given these age structure diagrams. It's a really traditional way of showing them how a population is changing over time, and it really tells a story about the population. So here we have three different age structure diagrams, and hopefully letter C is not blocked by my head, but it might be. This is my first time. You guys just got to go with it. All right, so we have an A, B, and a C model here. And so first thing you want to do is be able to just tell what you're looking at. So if we look at letter B, it says that we have age in years, okay? And then the bottom, it could be either in number of million of people, or it could be a percentage of the population. It doesn't really matter when you're looking at the picture. So we look at the different ages, and we know that the part that is red at the bottom of this diagram, those are pre-reproductive age. So those are kids. That's going to be between the ages of 0 and 14. And then the reproductive age is going to be between 15 and about 44. 15 and 44, that's what we use in these age structure diagrams. And then post-reproductive age is going to be from 45 up until, as old as people get. So one of the first things, so that's the first thing that you look at, and you'll notice that B and C are kind of shaped like pyramids, but A is not. It almost looks like an inverted pyramid, and so that tells us something. But with the way that populations are changing over time, it's probably more relevant to call them age structure diagrams than population pyramids. Okay, so we know we have number of males on the left and number of females on the right. I'm going to pause because my dogs are barking. When you look at B, we kind of look like we have the same number of males and females on each side. But when we look at letter A, you'll notice that in the post-reproductive age, there are a lot more males. See up here, it kind of sticks out more. There's a lot more males that are post-reproductive age, so in their 40s, 50s, and 60s, than there are females at the same age. And you'll notice in letter C that we kind of have the opposite. We have this little dip right here in the reproductive age males. So those kind of things will tell us a little bit of a story about the population. But first, let's look at generally first, so what does all this mean? When we're looking at population growth, those who are pre-reproductive age, soon they're going to be in the reproductive age, and so they're going to have children of their own. So if we have this larger base, then you would expect that as those children grow up, they're going to make a larger part of this pyramid, and we're going to have like an increase in the number of children. So if they were to do like, have replacement rate fertility, that you would end up having like an even, wider base on this pyramid in the future. Now, when we look at A, we have less children than we do people at reproductive age. So they're having less children than just to replace themselves. So as those children grow up and get to reproductive age, they're going to have, they can't really widen that base unless they all started to have 6 kids each, which would be very strange in today's day and age. So we see that as a shrinking population, or at least shrinking for the next, the foreseeable future when the pre-reproductive age children get to reproductive age. So then the next thing we're going to look at is the orange part. Now the orange part in part C, where that little dip is in the males, right? We were talking about right here. Why would we be missing a lot of males in their, 20s and 30s? Well, that could be something like war. If we had a dip in both sides of the pyramid, you might think that there was some type of, virus or something that was affecting them. You might see that in a population where there was a large amount of AIDS or something that caused people of a certain age to die. And then if we're looking at the yellow part, there are very few elderly here. And so they probably don't have very good health care because their elderly are not really making it too long. And then over here, when you look at country A, they have this really wide, more elderly people or post-reproductive age. So these, the bottom parts of that, they're still working. But when we get up in the, above about the second tier of the post-reproductive age, those people aren't working anymore. So, they become something that we think about in the economy where, they're no longer bringing money into the economy. So, that's going to affect how the country evolves. Now, in Germany, they found that a lot of people were moving away from Germany, and they had this large population of elderly. If you think about in the 80s, before the Berlin Wall fell and right after it did, they didn't have a lot of jobs, so they lost a lot of their reproductive age population at that time as people emigrated to other areas. And so they had this large post-reproductive age population, and then less people that were actually working to, help to drive the economy. So they've actually, in Germany, they started like bringing in lots and lots of immigrants. So a really large percentage of the population in Germany is now immigrants. Now, letter C, you can't really see the whole thing, but that's more of a stable population. It's like this, it's pretty much square when you get to the reproductive age and the pre-reproductive age. So their population won't be growing. It'll be pretty much staying the same. So the way that we would calculate growth rate would be R is the rate of population growth, and it's equal to birth rate minus death rate divided by 10. We did practice doing these in class, but you won't have to perform any calculations. You might just have to understand what the rate means. So remember that if it's a high rate, then that would mean that the population is growing, and high rate is like 3%, right? And then a low rate or if it was a negative rate, then that means that we aren't even replacing the population, and the population is really declining in that area. So a country like Japan, where we know that they have a lot more people that are post-reproductive age and very few children, their growth rate would be negative 0.3%. In the US, our growth rate is about 0.7%, so we're kind of stable. And then the growth rate in a country like, say, Ethiopia or Uganda would be more like 3%. So we know that we have this higher growth rate. So you won't be asked to make the mathematical calculations, but they might like flat out tell you, Uganda has a growth rate of this, and ask you to analyze what kind of effects that would have or how we would reduce the growth rate in that country. Okay, so replacement fertility is 2.1. So that is 2 kids for every 2 parents, and the 0.1 accounts for, really early deaths of children. Now, what we would want is in countries that had a high growth rate, we want to try to make that fertility rate get lower, closer to 2.1 or below 2.1. And there are several ways that we can do that. And these are things that we see in a demographic transition model, and also things that we think about as, remediation for high population. So for one, we have medical care for babies, and that reduces the number of children that die, meaning that people will not feel like they need to have as many children. When we have urbanization, it increases childcare costs, and that puts a financial burden on the families, so they're less likely to have more children. For instance, in China or Japan, when both parents are working, they have to pay these childcare costs, and so they're less likely to want to have that with several children because it just, gets more and more money. We also have children that are going to school instead of working. So again, they become this financial burden on their family. In areas or a long time ago in the United States, they were an asset to your family. They were helping hands on the farm, or they were helping you to, get water and, grind grains and things like that. We have a social security system that helps to support the elderly, which is excellent and helps us to have more of a less peak in that elderly population. Another thing is that when we educate women, we find that they may start to have children later. So that would change that population pyramid, because then the reproductive age would go from what it truly could be at, say, 15 years of age to maybe like what society in the area believes women should start having children. So in the US, maybe, I'm just making this up, let's say 22. So that reduces the number of children a woman could possibly have in her lifetime. So in countries where it's lower, one thing we might do is keep girls in school longer. So instead of only getting an 8th grade education, if you continue to give them, an upper level education like you guys are getting, then maybe they get out of school when they're 20 or 18, and then that would be, 4 less children or 2 less children that each girl would be able to have relative to if she got married at 15. Pause for a second. Now, the last thing that we would look at would be this demographic transition. Right? We have 4 stages to the demographic transition, and we said that theoretically there could be 5, but that would not be for this AP exam. Make sure you understand this model. That first, death rate begins to decline in the transitional stage because we don't have as many people starving. We've increased food production. We've improved medical care. And then in the next stage, the industrial stage, the birth rate starts to decline because we have more opportunities for women. We have more family planning. We have more people that are going to work. And what we are in the US, we are in a post-industrial stage where the birth rate and the death rate are both low. So we don't have as many people dying because we have good health care. We don't have babies dying. And we have all of the factors in the industrial stage that help to plummet that birth rate. And I want to put end.